you're wearing another grown man's name on your back. And what does that mean about you and tribalism and fandom? It's more just truly about aesthetics to me. NFL jerseys do not look good on anyone without pads underneath them. They are outsized in the shoulders to make room for shoulder pads. So you look like an idiot when you are wearing one of these jerseys.
Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog Fantasy. If you haven't signed up for Underdog Fantasy yet, what are you doing? Change that right now. Code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy will get you a deposit bonus of up to $250. We're changing gears. We're going into football season. Golf season is winding down, so it's bracket season on the Pat Mayo Experience. Make sure you like the episode, smash the like button, and sub to Mayo Media Network. And in the comment section, I want to know what pet peeves did not make the bracket that you think should be in the bracket. And there's a link down in the description and comment section if you want to see the full bracket in graphic form. To break this all down with me, Pete Overzet, host of LOLs and many other things at this point. Pete, do you have a drop page where I can find it all?
I did have a personal website, and then there was a WordPress update and it all got nuked. So I did get rid of that. I don't know. On my Twitter, I try to tweet out most of my shows, even though the algorithm hates tweeting out links to things. So I don't know. Just follow me on Twitter, I guess.
There you go. Nejad is on here as well. And you're the one who brought this idea to me. And full disclosure, I did not put the things in the bracket. Someone else did. So Sia, can you please explain how this came about?
Yeah, so it actually spawned from the sitcom bracket, which was like so beautifully done in terms of like the bracket itself. And then, of course, there were so many shows that you had that I was a part of. And John Markowski, who is a friend of mine, a Twitter friend of mine, who had done some like Strokes Gain narrative stuff with the First Cut pod when I was doing that with Rick and company. And long story short, he wanted to come up with a bracket idea, and we got into this like pet peeve conversation on Twitter, and it exploded into people just commenting back. This is like 2 years ago, commenting back and forth about their pet peeves. And John was like, well, you've inspired me with this sitcom bracket. I'm going to make a bracket of my pet peeves. So these are largely, if not all his. Pat, you might have subbed a couple in yourself, but this is his creation. He's an author. Like, he's a very good writer, really smart dude. And he put a lot of these together.
All right, well, let's jump into the bracket. If you want to vote in the bracket, again, hit the description. I'll be running it all through X at the PME. So they'll be up there for a week. You can vote on what advances and what doesn't. But I just want to talk it through because this is the fun part about it. So the number one seed in the Midwest bracket is last second cut in on a highway exit. That is a very strong one seed, Pete. It's going up against saying the word right excessively. But I could sub out right. I could sub in... People say the end of the day all the time, and it's really starting to grind my gears.
I think the people are going to turn on me quickly because this is one of my moves. I'm definitely guilty of this. There's like in Massachusetts, there's lots of spots too where the traffic builds up right to the exit. And so kind of the sharp GTO move is you get in the lane, speed up, and then cut off the slow people. And you just got to wait for your entry point. And I would say 95% of the time I pull it off without, even upsetting anyone. Occasionally you'll have to really wiggle your way in there. People will have their, feathers ruffled, but I just have to come clean. Like I'm a card carrying offender of this number one seed here.
See, so am I. This is my move every day going to work. I don't want to wait in the 20-minute line. I'll just drive to the front and cut in, and people are, it saves me 20 minutes a day. Why wouldn't I do it?
Pete, I don't know you as well as I know Pat, but none of this surprises me, Pat. Here's the thing. I think there's a way to do this where you can kind of like have a middle ground situation here.
No, listen, if you're going to do it at the front. Don't do it in the middle. Like, you don't want to cop out on this. You want to get somewhere. You want to get somewhere fast. You go to the front and cut in.
I'm just saying there's a way to justify it to yourself that you're not being a horrific person by kind of going past those people that aren't kind of bumper to bumper, and you kind of slip in so it doesn't look like you got to the front of the line. You got to kind of the middle front of the line.
No, that's the pussy way to do it, Sia. Pete, you go to the front, right?
Oh, no, yeah. I think there is some other ways to save face a little bit. Like, you don't want to just slam on the brakes and just like whip in. You know, you got to kind of ease into it. You do slow down. You kind of probe a little bit. You say,
Yeah.
oh, well, this minivan let me in. No. And they're like, oh, maybe this Camry will. You're trying to check some faces profile. Does this seem like someone who might be, you know, amenable to this move? And then you find someone who's like kind of on their phone and not paying attention. That's actually what you want. You might think you get rear-ended, but they are more distracted, so they're not tilted. It's the person that's hyper-focused, hands at 10 and 2 that are going to be pissed. Like, you're slowing me down. Get the distracted person, get your entry point, and you'll be fine.
This is the entire key right there. You look for the driver that has the phone, that has the face down, looking at their phone. Their reaction time is horrible. They're the same people at the beginning of a green light that don't go because they're still on their phone.
Yeah,
You see?
100%.
But I like that I'm not the only one who does this. That even Pete with the like just the pulling up a little bit slowly in that left lane, sizing everyone up, seeing where the right spot is to get in. There's a whole art form to it.
Yeah. I think it does have to do, like, you can't be honking on your horn. Like, you can get away with it if you fend off all the other aggro tendencies, because there are asshole drivers who do this move, but you are the benevolent person. This is how I'm defending it. So I hope this one goes down as a 1 seed. Can we see a massive upset here? I don't think this is this bad, guys.
I could see this getting upset, but I don't think it's against saying the word right too much. Like when someone is talking, you're like, right. Although I do hate when people do that. Maybe I do hate that more. Maybe this will win.
I am a huge offender of the right thing, and I didn't even realize it. And these are one of those things where you have to get called out on it before you actually realize, like, oh, I actually do this. And I got called out on it like 10 years ago by a friend. And I realized in the months after that I say right, not only after a sentence, but in the middle of somebody talking, as my active listening skills kick in. I'm just saying right constantly. It's not good.
Right. I think this is almost like a genre of it. I hate it the most. In normal conversation, I guess it doesn't bother me quite as much. If I'm listening to a podcast interview and the interviewer or interviewee is constantly interjecting those general words of affirmation, it drives me nuts. So you're saying, yeah, so I was doing this yesterday. And then this happened for sure. Like that kind of interjection that stops the flow of conversation drives me nuts when I'm listening to content. I guess I'm trying to think if it pisses me off quite as much in normal everyday conversations.
Well, real quick, because this also, you mentioned podcast, this also reminds me of the person who affirms their statement that it doesn't necessarily require affirming, and they'll make statements and they'll say right after it, like, oh, so we were going over here, right? And then the next sentence is, and then we were doing this, right? And it's extremely excessive. So the saying right applies in a lot of different cases.
I think I'm voting saying right on this one. And I notice it more on podcasts as well, because you're really dialed into listening something or to something. But it's almost like the host or whoever is doing it is actively showing the audience and the guest that they're paying attention without, most people can just pay attention and listen, then ask a question, rather than constantly, like Sia said, affirming that they are paying attention. I just assume you're paying attention. Unless it's Feinberg on this show, I assume most people are listening.
I do a lot of podcasting with Davis Maddox, so I can't make that assumption either.
All right, so I think that we're going to have saying right moving on, at least in my mind. I think it's 2-1 here, Pete. You want to vote for saying right?
Yeah, no, I am. Like I said, I can't vote against something that I do regularly.
Sia, the number 9 seed. I guess the right is the and the So you're the greatest offender of this of all. Pulling you onto the dance floor, guy, when you don't want to dance, or starting your food at the table before everyone else's food has arrived. I don't mind if people want to start. If they're like, hey, do you mind if I start? I never say no. I really don't care.
Okay, I don't even think you need to ask. This is something that should not be a pet peeve. It's not rude anymore. Like this, it's so old school. Like your food just came out. The other person's food's going to come out within a couple minutes. Go ahead and start. The pull you on the dance floor one, that really bothers me. As somebody who doesn't like to dance and largely thinks dancing is ridiculous, I do not want to be pulled on a dance floor because I look silly. Like I can't dance. That's part of the reason I don't like to dance. When somebody pulls me, I aggressively pull back, and it gets to a situation where they start to realize like 10 seconds in, like, oh, this guy's not coming with me. And it gets a little awkward. Hate when people do that. Don't do that at home.
Footloose Sia? Dancing shall be banned for life.
Yes. Yes. But Lucia, exactly.
I mean, maybe if you unbutton your top button, maybe you'd start to dance a little bit more.
I need to relax. There's no question.
Yeah, I was gonna. It's the what was the show Justified, right? And the Boyd character always had the top button, always buttoned up. I would say it's not a pet peeve of mine. See, I actually kind of like the look.
Oh, well, thank you. All right.
Yeah. Maybe
Sorry to derail us there, Pep.
Do you eat your food before all the food arrives? Like, do you care, Pete?
I am typically a fast eater, and I have definitely been accused of this before. But I don't think I get offended when it happens, but I am very conscious of it. I try to space it out so I don't look kind of like just an absolute animal inhaling my food.
I went from being the world's slowest eater as a kid to the world's fastest eater as an adult. So if I do start before everyone's food comes out, there is a possibility, Sia, that I am done my meal before people get their food.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I mean, listen, there is going to be some etiquette involved here. If you start early, you kind of have to, you obviously don't want to be done, but just the idea of starting, a minute or two before. I mean, listen, if it's your grandmother's at the table or something, like some elderly person, maybe you want to wait a little bit. But if you're among friends or among people of your same age, similar age, like it's just this is not a thing anymore, in my opinion.
Well, Pete, what do you want to vote for in this one? Are you a dance man?
You know what? I'm not the guy that's kicking things off, right? Like I'm not going to be the guy that's instigating it. We're wrapping up at the wedding, the dinner, and I'm going to try to get the dance going. I'm more like into the night. I've had a sufficient amount of drinks and I will capitulate and start dancing. Or my wife is like, no, you need to go dance with me for at least one song. So, pull you on the dance floor. That one, I think that's way more of a pet peeve for me because again, I am guilty of starting before the food. So yeah, I'm gonna vote for that one.
I'm gonna vote for that one as well. See, it sounds like that's where you're at as well.
Oh, 100%. Pulling you on the dance floor. It's practically like assault and battery to me. You cannot grab me and pull me onto somewhere where I don't want to be. That's a big pet peeve of mine.
Well, we got the 5 seed versus the 12 seed next, Pete. We have saying the word supposedly, I can't even say it that way, supposedly, and then putting ketchup on a hot dog, which I really don't care about. Put whatever you want on a hot dog.
Wait, why isn't putting ketchup on a hot dog the most common ingredient on, or is this some Canadian thing I'm walking into right now?
This is done by an American. I don't know. I most people I know put ketchup on hot dogs. Like, it's fine.
To me, this would be like saying, putting cereal or milk in cereal. Like, why is this a pet peeve? Isn't this just default?
Sia?
I don't know. So I'm a weird one. My hot dogs, because I don't like ketchup and I also don't like mustard. And clearly, I'm just like the fun police, all wrapped into one in the first part of the show.
I'm team barbecue sauce on hot dogs. I just like barbecue sauce more than I like ketchup.
That's fine. I actually have, this is going to sound weird to you. I have my hot dogs plain, like with like a hot dog bun, and that's it. I don't have it. Like I used to have like a chili and cheese thing at 7-Eleven or something like that. Like that's kind of good, but I don't really like the typical condiments. I don't know exactly why we're going to have to ask Markowski about this one, but I'll tell you what. Supposedly does really bother me unless you have like a speech impediment or something, which maybe filters into why you'd say the B instead of the D. But like you hear the word supposedly all the time. It's in just like our common parlance. How you don't pick up on the fact that it's not supposedly, definitely a pet peeve.
Yeah, there's ones like this where it has been said over and over so many times that it becomes like common. Like another one that's more obscure would be something like people say, I'm chomping at the bit, and the actual thing is champing at the bit, but just how people say it, like that doesn't bother me that much. It's an honest mistake. I do think with a word like supposedly, it is a little more tilting because it just seems sloppy. It just seems like you're not making the extra effort to actually know a fairly obvious word as opposed to an obscure phrase. This one is definitely more of a pet peeve for me, I think.
What would you put on your hot dog, Pete?
No, so like if I had to power rank, if I can only put one thing on, it's ketchup. If I can put two things on, it's ketchup and mustard. If I can put three things on, it's ketchup, mustard, and relish. That's kind of the order for me. I'm absolutely stunned. You know what? I did a Reddit AMA yesterday as part of their best ball week, and someone asked that question. And then my co-hosts who are also doing it, Pat and Ben, they both gave different answers. They said mustard and said relish. So maybe I'm just living in a ketchup bubble. I just thought everyone in the world agreed ketchup was the unanimous #1 condiment for ketchup. And maybe I need to pull my head out of the sand.
I think it's the most common. Like I said, I like barbecue sauce the most. If there's ketchup on a hot dog, it's not like I'm gonna be like, oh man, I can't eat this. There's ketchup on it. But it just seems pretty normal to me, Sia.
Yeah, it does seem normal to me. We're gonna have to vet this one because I think most people, if you polled people, I think you'd see like 60 to 70% begin with ketchup on their hot dog.
And I do think that people use ketchup in excess on things where I wouldn't use it. Like people put ketchup on their eggs. That's craziness.
That's gross. Unacceptable.
I don't mind hot sauce on eggs.
Yeah.
I'll do that one. Ketchup on eggs. I also get mad when people do ketchup with chicken fingers, chicken tenders. That one drives me nuts too. You know, you got to class it up a little bit. Ranch, honey mustard. The ketchup just strikes me as juvenile.
Yeah, I feel like there's like allocated things for ketchup. French fries, hot dogs, hamburgers, maybe if that's your jam. But that's really the extent of ketchup, at least in my mind.
Agree.
Yeah.
All right, next one. We got the 13 seed wearing a current player jersey at a non-sporting event when you are over the age of 30, and the difference between there, and there, which people really struggle with. And listen, with the advent of smartphones and autofill, that sometimes you don't mean to type in the wrong there, you don't proofread it, and boom, you look like a moron out in the universe. That happens. That's happened to everyone. But there are people out there, Pete, that just do not know the difference.
Yeah. And I guess that's a pet peeve if you don't actually know the difference. I would wager, 60 to 70% of the time online when someone gets it mixed up, they actually do know. They're just writing quickly and are not paying, careful attention to what they're saying. And so much conversation now, if it's on Discord, a quick reply, on Twitter, instant messages, even text messages, it's like you're just trying to convey information. You're just trying to get a point across. You're not proofreading. You're not setting up a bibliography for what you just wrote. This one actually isn't a pet peeve compared to this jersey one, which is a massive one. But I'll table this before I get into the jersey stuff. If you guys have thoughts on the misspelling of the theirs.
Well, I wanted to swing this the other way to you, Sia. It's the people that get mad about this stuff when it's clearly a common mistake because of technology and lack of proofreading. I think Pete's right. You're just trying to convey information. Who cares? I get that you would want to say it right, but if you do know the difference, who cares? And people use it as a disruption in an argument. It's like, well, you don't even know the right there, therefore you're a moron and you're wrong. It's like, that's not absolutely true now, is it?
I literally almost, I say literally because that's on this bracket too. I literally almost made this mistake like just last week texting somebody. And I'm actually surprised I caught it because just like Pete was saying, I was just like rattling off a text. I was like, oh, like I misspelled that particular there. This is not a big deal. And I do think you're right. People look for stuff like this when they want to troll somebody or when they want to try to win an argument. And it's just, listen, supposedly is a factor of 100 worse than any mistake on there, or there. I want to hear Pete's take on current player jerseys because it sounds like I'm 100% with him.
To curb it for 1 second, I will say the misuse of they are, the contraction there, is egregious because there's no way you're autocorrecting to that.
Yeah, true.
That's true. Yeah, the autocorrect safety net, I think, gives you a little bit more wiggle room, or I guess lack of wiggle room for explaining it away. Here's my thing about the jerseys. It's not just the whole thing of like you're wearing another grown man's name on your back, and what does that mean about you and tribalism and fandom. It's more just truly about aesthetics to me. NFL jerseys do not look good on anyone without pads underneath them. They are outsized in the shoulders to make room for shoulder pads. So you look like an idiot when you are wearing one of these jerseys. I've seen people pull off wearing the soccer kits or the soccer jerseys or whatever the Europeans call them. They look nice. They're kind of form-fitting there. They look like a normal t-shirt, could look like you're going to a country club event with your little nice polo on or whatever. The football jerseys look silly. And so to me, just from a pure aesthetic standpoint, you already are behind the 8 ball. And then on top of it, it's some random dude you root for on Sundays. I just cannot get on board with these. And if you want to wear them to a game, like whatever, that makes sense. You're going to root, you're going to show your fandom. But outside of a game context, I think it's absolutely egregious.
See, I have a friend who orders a bunch of jerseys. He's almost 40. He's also incredibly jacked, but I think he orders the kids' jerseys so he can wear them at the gym just to make his muscles pop.
Yeah, this is a big no-no. I mean, like, good for him for like getting something that fits, because I agree.
No, it absolutely does not fit.
Even worse. I mean, I agree with Pete's point. Like, it's an aesthetics reason more than it is I'm wearing some other man, or, in some cases, woman's jersey. The aesthetic, like, I think the distinction between football jerseys and soccer jerseys is an interesting one, because the soccer jerseys look way less ridiculous than a football one, or even a basketball one. The way the basketball jerseys hang, it just doesn't look good. I can't tell you the last time I put on a jersey. It was definitely decades ago. And I don't even wear them to stadiums, although I don't begrudge anybody that does that. But I want to co-sign everything Pete just said.
I could see wearing Pete, you're wearing a tank top right now. I could see working out in a basketball jersey. That would make, the fabric I don't think would breathe well enough for me. If I was working out, I'd want a pretty standard, like, workout, dry fit tank top if I was going to do that. But I could at least see the basketball jersey over the football jersey in that context.
Right, because there's actual a function to it. Like, if you wore a basketball jersey to the beach, that wouldn't strike me as weird. You're sleeveless, you're trying to get the sun out there, you're trying to show off your muscles. There's a function to it. The football jersey is legitimately impractical. In addition to the, bulky shoulders, you have these big, thick, long arms that droop down. Like, if you were to go to a tailor, what is one of the first things they do with your dress shirt, right? They get it and make sure that you don't have this gap hanging underneath your elbow because it looks tacky. So, like, everything about the football thing, the only function for it is to wear with shoulder pads underneath it. So here's my new take. I just came up with this. If you're going to wear a football jersey, knock yourself out, but you have to wear shoulder pads underneath it.
I'm in on it. You could even scrub some quarterback shoulder pads into that as well. That aren't like the huge linebacker ones. And then maybe it just looks like you have some nice traps on the go with some good muscle definition in your shoulders, and fill out that jersey entirely. Even in Canada, Sia, we don't see a lot of people walking around in hockey sweaters either. Just, it's very impractical.
Yeah, I mean, the same oversized issue. I mean, here in the States, it's so rare, now that I think about it, for somebody to be wearing a hockey jersey outside. And that makes sense. A hockey jersey outside of, like, watching an NHL game. We don't see that at all, really anywhere outside of a stadium or an arena.
You don't see a bunch of people walking around the city wearing Capitals jerseys?
I don't. Well, when they're going to Caps games, yes. I work out of that arena often. There's a lot of Caps fandom, but you don't see it outside of game day.
Okay.
The other thing too is we also now live in an era where the teams and just whatever apparel companies are making, like, fashionable stuff. Like, you can get the cool ugly sweater for your team. Like, you can get the nice polo shirts. Like, there are actually nice versions of clothes to support your team, which I think makes it even more inexcusable to be wearing an oversized jersey.
3 seed, not giving out candy on Halloween versus the phrase, if you will, which I don't think I've actually ever heard anyone say in the wild, Sia.
I say if you will a lot to cap sentences. I think it goes back to my, like, lawyer days, where stuff like that, like this pretentious, like, elitist sounding, like, it's not like it's Latin or anything, but like some of these phrases that don't really have any meaning. I used to say those quite a bit. I'm an offender of the if you will thing. I think it has a place, but very sparingly. People definitely overuse if you will. We could talk about the no candy on Halloween too, but if you will is definitely like a wheelhouse thing for me. I can understand why it's a pet peeve for others, though.
Well, Pete, is even giving candy out on Halloween a pet peeve? It's just something assholes don't do. Like, just you're a jerk.
Right. Yeah. I thought the question was going to be not giving out candy on Halloween.
Yeah, no candy on Halloween. Like, not giving out the candy, I believe. Yeah, not giving candy on Halloween. But that's what assholes do.
This is what I will say, because I've been in both camps. Now that I'm a dad, we're home on Halloween's, we get the bags out, we're ready to go. I will say there was a portion, in my 20s, we're going out. We turn the lights off on the porch, turn all the lights off. So, we're not trying to advertise that there might be candy. I think the real dick move is if it kind of looks like you might be given candy and then you go and someone knocks on your door and you don't. Like, if you're not going to give out candy, you need to make your house or your apartment or whatever look as uninviting as possible so they don't get rug pulled, right? You don't mislead them. I think that's where my pet peeve would come from.
I think it's a clear winner here, but I don't think that either of these are strong candidates versus the next two, which could have been 1 seeds for me. I have strong takes on both of these. The 11 seed is invading someone's personal space when they're talking to you, just basically close talking, versus reclining your seat on an airplane, which, Cuss wouldn't point this out, but to quote him, people should go to jail for that.
Pat, I think it's the personal space thing that people should go to jail for. It's such a lack of spatial awareness. And what's so funny about close talkers, which of course you mentioned is synonymous with personal space, is that you start to backpedal like very indiscreetly, a very subtle, slow backpedal. You're inching back, and the close talker matches it and starts to inch forward. I don't understand why it's not offensive to them to be in your personal space in that capacity. It is. I know people like this, and I just like, they're not bad people, but I don't understand the close talking thing. I don't get it.
They might be bad people.
We're also living in like a post-COVID area too, where we need to respect our personal space a little more. I think that kind of reset things from a distancing perspective. And look at all the other areas of society where people get up close. It's when they're angry with each other. You see the umpire and the manager getting up next to each other, and they're 2 inches from each other's faces because they're mad. They're trying to get a point across. We're just having a normal conversation. Like, you don't need to be this close to me. This one has to be near the top. Like, this one could make a deep run in the tournament. I don't know anyone who likes someone up in their space. Like, who outside of, if you're making out with someone, do you want that close to you?
Right.
I think it will make a deep run. The problem is, I would vote for the seat lean on an airplane. What reason do you have to do this? And to quote Cuss, they do it so you can take advantage of it. But reclining like 5 degrees just only disrupts the person behind you, Pete. It doesn't do anything for you.
It drives me nuts. I am not a recliner myself. I think, I'm 6'1", and I feel the difference in leg room and space very quickly, like at those heights. I think if you're a little shorter, my dad's 6'5". I've seen him on flights just be an absolute misery because someone chews up that extra 1.5 inches of space that he has. And like you said, what marginal gain? You're not lying back in a bed to get to sleep. It really is just a power move. I think it is inconsiderate, and I am firmly on board with this one being a major pet peeve. But I don't think it can beat out, because this is like a version of invading someone's personal space. Like, I'd rather have someone's chair 1.5 inches than someone like right up in my face.
And this is a good point, that you're not alleviating, creating new room for yourself. You're just kind of going like this, and that's it. And it's disrupting everything going on, especially to some of the bigger people behind you who, like, all of a sudden you're hitting their knees. Or if they have their tray out and they're like, especially at this point in time, like watching something on it or working on a laptop or trying to eat off the tray, like you could knock over a drink. It absolutely sucks to you.
So I have a question for you both. I don't lean back in the seat either. I do think there's a psychological component, because people, they walk onto the plane, they know they're going to be relatively uncomfortable. And somehow, even though it's pretty obvious they're not going to be more comfortable leaning it back like 4 degrees, I think somehow they're thinking, oh, I've achieved max comfort. So like here I am finally, like I've checked all the boxes to be as comfortable as possible. But I also think it's ridiculous. But let me ask you this. If you're on a flight, like I'm flying to California, to the Los Angeles area tomorrow, if you're on like a longer flight, especially if it's a flight that might have like an overnight quality to it, would that be acceptable to lean the seat back a little bit?
No.
Fair enough.
Pete?
Yeah. The only other thing too, the only exceptions for me, obviously, if no one's behind you, if there's a child behind you, one other exception I will make occasionally, if it is an overnight flight and the person behind me is passed out, and I know that I am not going to interrupt them, they're not like on their tray table trying to do work, something like that. Those are another exception that I would make of like, okay, I'm not harming anyone here.
I guess the only exception I would have, Pete, is if it was Fat Joe and he just really needed to lean back because that's what he does.
Yes.
So I guess personal space is moving on, although none of us seem to enjoy the reclining on the airplane.
Yeah.
It's just...
Go ahead, Pete.
No, it's just the personal space can mean so many different things. And I think that when I hear personal space, I think face to face. And there's something at least more detached about a seat coming back that is like, am I going to be mad when someone does it? Yes. Am I going to be miserable the entire flight? No. Versus, let's juxtapose that. Say the person in the middle seat, you got the aisle, and they are just a chatterbox and they want to talk to you on this entire flight, and they're turning and they're looking at you and talking to you like 3 inches. Give me the person leaning back every single time over the person trying to engage me over the course of an entire flight.
So this is interesting. This is interesting.
Ahead,
To kind of go off what Pete's saying here is, I hate when people talk to me on planes. However, it's only because the conversation is usually so bad. I have been on planes where the person has sat next to me, and I've talked to the person for like 2.5 hours because they were a great hang, and it makes the flight go by famously. The problem is that's just a very low percentage.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking like 10, 15% tops,
If that.
which is why you want to try to avoid that at all costs.
Noise canceling
Especially 'cause
headphones accomplish that.
And by the way, it's also because we're outfitted now with like iPads and laptops and things we can like get done or watch. Like the last thing we need is just like inane, like, formalities type of conversation. I will say this, I think the committee really got this one wrong by having personal space and seat lean on a plane up against each other. Like if you put either of these two against, let's say, ketchup on a hot dog, or most of the ones, no candy on Halloween, like these are like Sweet 16, Elite 8 quality candidates, and one of them's bounced in the first round. Tough decision by the committee there.
I think that these are the two favorites in this portion of the bracket. Like these two would face off to the end. One of these two is going to win this side of the bracket, I think, unless these other 4 that are remaining can really upset it here. Number 7 seed, quote, "It is what it is," versus 10 seed, PDA on social media. Maybe, Pete, I'm too old for this, but I don't see a whole lot of PDA on social media.
No, I mean, if you were to maybe widen the definition of it, like when people post, and hopefully none of you guys have done this, I'm sorry if you have, but like the thing where you have like the maternity photos and you're like next to your spouse and they have their like belly out, and it's just like, it's just too much skin, like for that kind of photo. If we include stuff like that, I mean, this is a runaway landslide for me. I do get somewhat uncomfortable if you're going through an Instagram story and it's just your friend, making out with his girlfriend or vice versa, and like a selfie there. Even if it's like at the Eiffel Tower, it's like, can't you guys just take a normal photo? Like, do you have to be kissing in front of it? We know it's romantic. I do think PDA on social media, there's no room for it.
Well, it is what it is, Sia. That's the problem.
It is what it is.
Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Supercharger, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Everyone who tunes into the Pat Mayo Experience knows from time to time I like to talk to you about some health supplements that I end up taking, and I've been doing Timeline's Mito Pure now for about a month. Feel great? And I think you can too. Take 2 soft gels a day for 2 months, and you can see significant improvements in your cellular energy, your muscle strength, and your endurance. That was the big thing. I've been golfing more this summer and lifting less. Yet when I go back to the gym for my once a week, like max lift, I am not really atrophying that much. I'm not losing a ton of muscle, which is absolutely fantastic news for me and my golf game, because if you work out too much, then you get too sore, you get too stiff, you need to retain that flexibility. I'm retaining my muscle mass at the same time, although I'm not working out as much, and it comes in 2 product designs to fit your needs. They're berry powder, which is great to mix into your breakfast, yogurt, or daily smoothie. That's how I've been doing it. I've been eating some strawberries, raspberries, blackberries with a little bit of yogurt, a little bit of protein powder, then boom, Timeline's Mito Pure right on top of that. Or they have soft gels for the days where you're just on the run and wanted something convenient to grab and go. So, Timeline is offering 10% off your first order of Mito Pure right now. So go to timeline.com/Mayo to get that 10% off. All right? Okay, welcome back. We had a bit of a technical breakdown. So here we are a week later. Am I wearing exactly the same thing that you wouldn't notice? Yes, but I've encouraged Pete to grow some sleeves. So here he is. Thanks, guys, for coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, I've really matured in the past week, and I can't be doing this sleeveless stuff anymore. I'm ready to have even more elevated highbrow takes today.
So, Sia, the last time where we left off, which for the viewers will be about 20 seconds, it was PDA on social media as a 10 seed versus it is what it is. People saying that, and that's where we were. It is what it is. So your generic trope, your cliche, if you will, and there's a if you will. I think that was one that we just did. I said that no one ever said it, and here I am saying it. So maybe that should end up moving on. But which one do you think advances from these two?
It's got to be it is what it is, because we've just heard it so much over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And again, it's something that if anything, if it has any use whatsoever, it's as a stall tactic to come up with the rest of your thought, or actually an original thought beyond that cliche. But the problem is people say it is what it is without anything afterward or anything before it. And it's just like, that doesn't advance the conversation at all. And I can't stand it. Like, if you're going to say something, have some value to that thing that you say. That's got to move on.
Pete, the end of the day is the one, I think I mentioned that before, just absolutely drives me up the wall.
Yes, I would say at the end of the day is more of a pet peeve for me than it is what it is. There's something almost like nihilistic or existentialistic about saying it is what it is, where it's like, I guess I don't hear people say that a lot. It's more almost in a, self-deprecating way where they're like, man, like, you got a hole in your jeans. And he's just like, I don't know, man, it is what it is. Like, yeah, I don't find that, like, it doesn't grate on me when someone says that. I kind of like it. It's a little endearing to me. So maybe I'm taking the contrarian angle here.
I'm kind of with you. I'm more pro PDA on social media as more of a pet peeve for me, just because I find it weird. It's something that I wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The funny thing about the end of the day is I get why people say it in conversation or when they're doing podcasts, but I've seen it pop up in writing now, which absolutely makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of those cliche phrases, like in a vacuum, people like to say a lot, especially in the sports, and like we're getting into fantasy football season here. And so again, those don't have, because nothing's in a vacuum. Everything has context. So again, that's just a valueless statement. At the end of the day, it's another one though. I'm not a big fan. I will admit I do say that a little bit, but I feel like I've scaled it back.
So the final matchup in the Midwest, Sia, is leaving the drawers and cupboards open instead of closing them, or stopping your cart in the aisle at a grocery store, which might be the winner of this bracket, because that is psychotic behavior.
So it's interesting, because when I think of cart, I like, and I don't know, maybe this is on the rest of the bracket. I got to double check it, because I've only done a once through, but returning the cart, I know, is a thing that people like to talk about. So maybe we can talk about that as well. Maybe that's a different part of the bracket. Yeah, the drawers open thing doesn't really bother me. Like, I'm definitely a guy that leaves the cabinets and the drawers open just by accident, not on purpose. And then I'll go back like minutes or hours later and I'll realize they're open. I'll close them. But yeah, stopping the cart in the aisle. I'm going to agree with you. That one's got to advance.
Yeah, Pete, I do.
It has to.
I believe that returning the cart is one of the other ones in the next show that I'm doing as a part of the bracket. So that one is separate from just stopping in the middle of the aisle and just looking around like a goober.
Well, the thing too, there's a difference between the thing in the aisle, you're dealing with people in public, strangers. The cupboard thing, you're dealing with most likely your significant other, people you live with, family, friends, roommates. It's a little easier to be like, come on, man, just close the kitchen, cabinet or whatever. Like, that's less of a nuisance there. I guess if they do it over and over and over again, maybe you have bigger marital problems that you need to, get to the bottom of. But when a stranger does it, it's so frustrating because you can't actually say what you want. Maybe you can. I'm not going to, unload on them, but it is massively frustrating. And I find you could have a bigger blanket category of people lacking spatial awareness in public. Just, I'm always blown, or my mind is always blown when I see people jaywalking or walking across the street, not even looking both ways. I'm like, your self-preservation instincts are non-existent right now. It's people are in their own bubble, in their own world. And sometimes too, with those carts, they'll back up into you. I've definitely gotten hit in my, the back of my heels over there, my shins. And I think this one has to take the cake.
It's like you can almost treat most of these things like driving, like no different than going up an escalator or navigating the sidewalk, depending on where you live. I think the cart should kind of work the same way. Like when you're going down the aisle, stick to the right side. Even if you need to get something on the left side, just stick to the right side, park your cart there. People just like to walk straight down the middle and then stop. And then you can't get around them either way. Like it's mind-boggling how this happens.
Yeah, it's the lack of social awareness. I agree with what Pete says. It's the same thing. Like I was at an airport yesterday, traveling back from California, and it's a crowded airport. There's certain parts of the airport that are really crowded. And you have these people that are not only walking super slow, but they're almost walking at angles to almost cut you off if you want to pass it. It's not on purpose. It's because they're so unaware of their surroundings. I find it incredibly rude. I don't even chalk it up to a lack of awareness, although that's part of it. I think it's super rude that you're not even conceiving of the fact that there might be people around you walking at a different pace or straighter than you are. That is a huge pet peeve of mine.
The other airport one that didn't make the bracket that I probably should have included, because I've railed about this a bunch of times, Pete, is when people just stop at an airport. Like there's a flow to an airport. You're walking this way, you're walking that way. There's it's not a single file line, but people will just be on their phones. They're trying to check into their flight. I get that for some people, airports are super stressful, but when there's a flow of traffic going one way and one going the other, and just one person stops, like I've ran into people at airports when this happens.
Yeah, there's basically, kind of unwritten rules about pathways. I would say my pet peeve version of that, it's often not just a single person, but a group of people. Maybe it's a family and they're like, oh, we're all going to talk, figure out where we're going next. And it's like, you guys got to shift over to the side. Like you can't be planted here, making the flow of traffic, do a full, circumnavigation of your group is absurd. But no one thinks like this. Everyone's in their own bubble. The world revolves around them.
Mm-hmm.
The cousin of this too is when there's multiple people walking down a sidewalk, yet they take up the whole sidewalk, so you can't walk the other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. Again, it's a lack of awareness, but to me, it's just a lack of it's just rude. It's rude. Like I feel like these are the skills you should be conscientious of as you're growing up, and it's just like it eludes certain people, it bothers me even more than the lack of awareness part.
So that's the entire Midwest bracket. Let's try to pick a winner from this, just a personal winner. So for me, to recap the ones that we had here, we had cutting in on the highway, which Pete and I are both for, so it's not a pet peeve for us, saying right after asking a non-question to turn it into a question, pull you on the dance floor, starting your food before all the food arrives, supposedly putting ketchup on a hot dog, which is just insane that it's on this. Current player jersey wearing as an adult. There, and there. No candy on Halloween, if you will. Personal space. Leaning on a plane. It is what it is. PDA on social media. Drawers open and stopping the cart in an aisle. The two for me would be reclining your seat on a plane. But I think that just stopping your cart in the aisle, Pete, is the winner for me.
I'm with you. That is the one that is most frustrating. And we were talking about airports and, flows of traffic. The aisle is the most constrained of all of those. Like there is often, if there's two carts and someone's cart isn't perfectly straight, there is no way to get around them. They are it's one thing if it's an inconvenience. I got to walk over here to go around you. In a grocery aisle, you don't have anywhere else to go. You are held prisoner in that moment until they recognize other people in the world exist.
Where are you going, Sia?
I think if you were to give me a top two, it would probably be It Is What It Is and personal space. But the winner for me is personal space, because and this kind of goes with what we were talking about with the airport stuff, like lack of spatial awareness. It kind of ties in. Like I find it so like it's just I back up on people who are in my personal space and they move forward. I just find it so odd that people like engage in that type of obstruction of one's personal space, and I see it quite a bit. So that one's the winner for me.
Well, let's move to the West part of the bracket, the other bottom. We'll see what clashes in the semifinals coming out of this bracket and coming out of the one we just talked about. The number one seed over here, Pete, is driving 60 miles per hour in the fast lane, which would be 100 kilometers an hour if you are outside of the United States, versus no profile pic on social media.
Yeah, I mean, this one, which one's the one seed of these?
Is the fast
Exactly.
lane.
Wow. Man, I might be going for another upset
Me
here.
too.
Yeah, and maybe okay, so the three of us are content creators. We deal with, YouTube comment section, Twitter trolls, whatever social media platform you're on. It is for us, I'm going to guess, like this reflexive thing of this signifies that you're a troll. You're not someone who cares about putting your real identity. There is no stakes to what you are saying, and therefore you can say whatever you want. And so that's what we all feel when we see these things. That to me specifically is more tilting. The 60 mph in the fast lane, that's kind of like the person stopping in the airport. At least I can get around you. Is it annoying that you don't know you're there? But can I quickly pass you and get back in and kind of passive aggressively cut you off and be like, hey, you're going too slow for this lane? Yes. And I can move on with my day. But the no profile picture thing, that really gets at me. I've always had the take where I wish that anyone who's trolling me, that we could hop on a video call and you tell me what you want to say right then and there with your face. And then I get to make fun of you publicly in my arena as opposed to you hiding in yours. So I'm going for the upset here, guys.
I'm with
Pat,
you.
I think.
I'm,
Go ahead, go ahead.
No, I'm with you guys. It's just, but I think it's the job that we have. It's not necessarily that no profile pic is so bad. It's just what I envision no profile pic guy saying to me. And it's just how it's going to be the worst.
So it's a really interesting take because I have a slightly different take. And Pat, I'm not quite as aggressive as you are sometimes on social media. So sometimes I get the good tweets. And I know you get those too, and I know Pete does too, but sometimes I get the good tweets and the complimentary tweets, but because there's no profile pic, I can't quote tweet it because it looks like I'm like quote tweeting a shadow account because it's like Jimmy 6547X and he's got like 7 followers. And I'm like, dude, all you have to do, you don't have to put a picture of yourself, put a picture of a vacation spot or an animal, or it doesn't matter so that it looks like a legitimate profile. But because it's not there, so like the trolls part is true, but it's also those that are investing in you, that like your stuff. You can't even like really engage with them because it doesn't look like it's a real account.
You can engage with them because you have the awareness to do that. I know, Pete, of someone, I don't know if you know him, but I know him pretty well, that he has, I don't know, 20 to 30 Twitter burner accounts that he's constantly like tweeting at himself like really positive things and then quote tweeting it and just assuming that none of us realize what's going on.
Oh no.
That is a sad state of affairs. Yet to me, I'm kind of with C on this one where it's like, because you often get the comments, right? Your fans will come to your defense and they'll be like, Pete, don't engage with the trolls. Like you don't need them. I do think that way too. Like, I'm like, why are you giving this person the time of day? Unless they're setting you up for a really comedic tweet or a funny dunk and you're like, hey, they put it on a tee. I'm just going to take a swing here because people will enjoy this. If you're engaging in earnest with these faceless, nameless individuals, I think they got you. If you're debating with a fool, what do you gain outwitting a fool?
And most of the time, they're just doing it to provoke you anyway. Like, I'm completely with you. Like, if I think that's a good rule of thumb for any content creator or anyone on the internet. Just do not engage with people without profile pics because you're just being set up 90% of the time.
Well, and it's also like, it's called social media, right? Like this all started back, you go back to Facebook and MySpace, and it was like, put your friends in your group, have the profile picture of the people you went to college with. The point was to socialize with people It's like you're forgetting the main step. When you hey, we're all socializing here. It's laziness too. It's like, yeah, like you said, put a picture of a fire hydrant. I literally don't care.
Yeah.
Take the 2 seconds to upload a photo, because looking at the same default avatar that everyone else who is lazy has too, it is tilting to me.
Mm-hmm.
The 9 versus 8 seed, which will take on the no pick and profile in the next round via our bracket. You can get the entire bracket. You can click down in the description. It'll be up there. Smelly food on an airplane versus, Pete, putting food back on the wrong shelf. It's smelly. It's got to be smelly food.
It has to. I actively am, like when I'm going down for to find my seat, I'm constantly doing the scan, right? It's like, oh, what did this person bring something in from the airport? Even when we're in the waiting area to get on the plane, I'm like, this person has, a chicken parm sandwich that they just bought. Don't let me sit next to them. This person is the landmine. I think sometimes I'm like, I'd rather sit next to the toddler than the person eating like a bowl of noodles and slurping them up next to me on the flight. So yeah, the smelly food, the eating on the flight. I'm not a big snacker in general. I don't really like eating on flights unless I'm forced to, like a super long fight. So any kind of food next to me is a big no-go.
See, you were just on a plane. Did this happen to you?
I was that person, so this is really interesting.
No.
What's funny, what's really funny is I'm not usually this person, but it was a longer flight. But I will say this: don't we need to clarify what smelly means? Like, is it a food that has a pungent smell or like an odor to it?
Both.
Because to me, okay, fair enough. But like to me, like I got a chicken sandwich. Like I don't think, granted, you could definitely smell it, and if somebody's hungry, they might be like, "Oh, I want one of those. I wish he wasn't eating it." But because it was like a handheld thing, I wasn't like slurping up noodles, and to me, it wasn't some like odor that would be obnoxious to people, like something like I don't know, so some other food might be. So for me, I don't really have a problem with smelly food on the plane as long as the smell is like at least in the ballpark of good. But I mean, I kind of get it. I kind of felt like I was being that guy to some degree. I can't lie.
See, I don't think the problem with like a chicken sandwich, unless it's like, so I think there's some main offenders here. Like Indian food in general is just going to be like bad on a plane because the smell will linger. That's always the problem. Like even after you're done, it's still going to be there. But I used to play poker with a guy who was just doing massive cycles of HGH and steroids trying to get into bodybuilding the entire time. So he was like in the middle of his cut and like trying to get really lean and get the veins popping. So all he would eat would be like 9 hard-boiled eggs and plain chicken with mustard on it. And he'd like bring it to poker and sit next to me and open up this fucking Tupperware container, and that egg smell would just hit you in the face, and it would just be around the entire time. Like, and that was just like in a poker room. I didn't want that there. I couldn't imagine being on an airplane with some guy eating eggs the entire time.
That's not acceptable. Period.
What also frustrates me, and maybe this is just because how I operate, like a lot of people will, and I get it, okay, you're not specifically hungry at this exact moment, you're saving it for on the plane. But when I have hot food, like I want to eat it then before I get on the plane. Like I want to be done with it. I want to have the trash gone. I want to have my hands free. I don't want to be lugging this around and dealing with this. But some people in there, they're just like, all right, I'm going to, order my next 3 meals right now and space them out over 4 hours on this plane ride. I think it's psychotic behavior. I understand other people have different relationships with food than me, but it is something where you have to pay the price. I will up this one more. The only thing worse than smelly food on an airplane, smelly food on a bus. Back in the day, I used to take like the 4-hour bus ride from Boston down to New York, and you're already, I'm trying to save money, you're on a bus, and someone next to me eating like a gross Subway sandwich or whatever, some hot food. That was even more constraining, more suffocating than even on a plane.
The next one is going to be backing into a parking space versus espresso instead of espresso. Now, I order Americanos, and I usually get an extra shot of espresso in it to up that limit to like 5 shots of espresso to really get me going in the morning. But the people back will repeat my order back to me, and they'll say espresso. Like, you work in the coffee shop. Like, no one has told you this?
I find this incredibly puzzling because like you hear it, you're right. And by the way, I get espressos every day. I get 2 doppios or double espressos every day at separate parts of the day. That's my caffeine intake for the entire day. But and that's a lot, by the way. But the point is, I have people repeat the order back, or just they're not even repeating the order back. They'll just repeat what I say, and they'll like sometimes say espresso. And I find it so puzzling again that they work at it would be like saying instead of coffee, saying toffee, like very clearly saying toffee. Like I don't understand how such a popular drink can actually be mispronounced. I mean, I think this is going to be a battle. This is a 5 versus 12, and the 12 is going to have a lot of merit. It's going to get a lot of votes, but the espresso thing, I don't get it.
Yeah, and this is probably, similar to the social media one. I don't go to coffee shops a ton. We make our own coffee here. And so this is not something I encounter. I can understand why it would be frustrating, but it doesn't really get me going. The backing into the parking space, that one again, is frustrating to me when you are the one waiting, similar to the shopping cart dynamic, right? You often have to sit there while this individual does a 6-point turn to get in there and do their backing into the spot. What I am I love the pull through. If the 2 spots are there and I can turn and pull through, so I get the best of both worlds, a quick park and a quick exit. Love that move. But anyone sitting there to spend the time to back into a parking spot, it's just being selfish. If you want to do it in your own driveway, whatever, knock yourself out. Like, that's on your time. When you're holding up traffic, now I'm upset.
It depends, I think, because there aren't a ton of places where you actually do want to back into a spot. Like, what's the most common place that you think you go to into a parking lot? Probably either a mall or a grocery store would be the 2 places, or somewhere where you're shopping, or just shopping centers in general is probably the place where you're going to park the most. Why would you want to back into a spot? Because then you don't have your trunk accessible to you. Like, if you come out with a cart full of groceries, you can't jam that in between the cars to get back to your trunk. Now you have to park your cart in front of your car, grab the items, walk to the back of your car to get to your trunk. You wouldn't want it that way, would you?
Well, so the problem is, and I speak from an attorney background here, because a lot of the small time cases that I had were like literally backing out of parking spaces where your visuals aren't as good, right? So it's easier to come forward so that you're not like bumping into a car, or that you don't have to like turn around. And I know people have the computer systems and the video to kind of see that, but a lot of people still turn around. So I think they just feel more comfortable, especially in those like a convenience store or sometimes a grocery store, where, and especially in the city where the spots are a little bit tighter and the little pathways are a little bit tighter. I think they feel more comfortable leaving. They'd rather do what you just said with the grocery versus backing out and worrying about somebody backing into them at the same time.
And I think most of the time the backing in thing is almost an OCD behavior, that it's not actually serving a functional purpose. If I'm going to be charitable, I would say the one time I think it makes sense. Sometimes if you're at an event or a space where there is going to be a traffic buildup, everyone exiting at the same time, say you're at a stadium or whatever, sometimes having that quick exit can be nice. Like, if you get locked in there, say if you're in a parking garage. I was at a Boston College basketball game in the winter, and we just idled there while all these other cars at the top of the parking garage passed us, and we couldn't back out. And I remember thinking at the time, it would have been nice if I reversed in here and then I could nudge out easier, seeing the flow of traffic. So that's the one exception I think I'm willing to make. But if it's just OCD behavior, get out of here.
I don't mind it if there is no one around. And listen, backing into a parking spot, especially with modern cameras, I mean, hell, there are some cars, you just press a button, it does it for you. Like, that's not that big of a deal. But just the rule of thumb, if you're in a parking lot and there's designed spaces for everyone, which I assume that there would be in a parking lot, just go up, put your mirror just adjacent to the third one up from the spot you're pulling into, just wheel the car all the way around and just go blip and go back in. It should take like 2 seconds.
Sia, what I'm hearing is that Pat Mayo is a big fan of backing in. He's tried to be delicate. Do you do this every single time you go to the grocery store? You back it in, Pat?
I don't, because the grocery store would be against my point, because it would cause me problems later on. I don't mind backing into spots if it's What
about the mall?
Like,
what about a non-grocery store?
I went to the gym today and I backed into my spot. It was a pretty empty parking lot, but I couldn't pull through anywhere, so I backed into the spot. Not a big deal.
So that's the thing. Wow. If it's relatively empty, I totally get the backing in thing. I mean, there's like no downside to that. You're not keeping anybody waiting, right?
It's a power move. If I see that and I see this guy come out and he's got his nice pink polo shirt on, ready to go to the gym, I'm judging you, Pat. I'm going to be judging that move.
Well, I was actually dressed as Pete Overzet from part 1 of the show as I was getting into my car.
All right, you're good then. You're good.
Next one, we have not brushing the snow off a car, which I guess doesn't apply to a lot of people watching the show who live in warmer climates, versus asking questions during a movie or a show, whether it be at a movie theater or at home. My wife, big fan of us watching something and then her being on her phone and then asking me things about the thing we're supposed to be watching together.
This one isn't even close to me. I mean, it's interrupting a movie or a TV show. I mean, the number of times, I would say my wife isn't a big offender of it. It's more like if I'm watching something with my parents. My parents are actually in town this week, and you're just constantly having to pause. You know, it's like, let's pause this because I don't want to have the conversation while it's going on. So it just stop start. It's like, this might as well be director's commentary edition of this show. It's very frustrating. The snow on the car thing, like, I don't know, maybe it kind of is fun. Like, you're driving down the highway and they're like, look at these jamokes didn't, shovel the snow off their car and like chunks are flying off. It's more entertainment than anything. So to me, this is a landslide victory.
Again, Nejad Esquire, that's super dangerous, Pete. That's part of the point here. You don't want it flying
my
off
bad.
into somebody's line of vision and getting in a car accident on the highway.
See it? Were you a personal injury? Like, were you Jim the fucking Hammer Shapiro?
Yeah.
Just like chasing ambulances?
No, I was on the other side of it. I was actually a civil defense attorney. I was trying to shut those guys down because that's a long story worthy of an hour in and of itself. But I was those commercials you see, I was the guy up against those people.
So how do they get paid? Do they like say like, hey, we're going to represent you, but we get 40% of whatever the settlement is?
Yeah, that's right. It's somewhere between usually 30 and 40%, depending on what stage the case is in. But yeah, you're going to get, you're not going to get paid. Like if the plaintiff doesn't get paid, typically the lawyer doesn't get paid. So there's a plaintiff's attorney. So there's risk involved in taking on a case. But if you feel good about the case and you feel good about the liability portion and the damages portion, if you get a big case, I mean, you're made. There's a lot of plaintiff's attorneys that do really well because they get these big cases and they get 40% of whatever the verdict is or whatever the settlement amount is. And you start stacking that up, it doesn't take long for you to be super successful. But again, I was on the other side of that.
Yeah, seems like seems like you should have switched
come
sides.
for the I was gonna say, you come for the pet peeves and you get some legal alpha on the side. I mean, what a bang for your buck here on the channel.
Next matchup. Go ahead.
No. Well, Pat, real quick, because the cues during the show, I just want to agree with everybody here. It's not even just questions, right? Because Peter, I think if you alluded to this, some people, and Pat, you did too, some people have like commentary. That's more frustrating because if you have a question, it's like, I understand you're kind of in a state where like you don't get what's going on. And I'm kind of that guy sometimes too, don't get me wrong. And I feel like I need to ask the question or I'm not going to get the next 30 minutes. But when you get to the commentary part, like let's say I had a wife and let's say her name was Gigi because that is my wife's name. And let's say we watch The Challenge all the time because it's our favorite show. She isn't asking questions because she's smarter than me, but she's providing commentary. And it's super annoying because the thing I'm on the TV is so much more important than the commentary I'm hearing from her. It's so much more compelling. And yet I don't want to like yell at her for it because she's so invested in the show. So I have to kind of just like nod my head and be like, oh yeah, no, I totally agree. While not making eye contact to kind of give her the impression like not super interested in what you have to say here. I want to hear what's going on the TV. So it's not just questions is what I'm pointing out here.
The question thing is tough because you have to get your TSOP range into the time spent on phone versus what you're actually watching. There are certain shows, Pete, that don't allow you to be on your phone at all. And there's other ones where like my wife and I both enjoy just sitting around late at night after the kids go to bed. We got like an hour. We'll probably like send some emails, look at Instagram while we have something on TV. But we pick out the right type of show where there's no questions to be asked. It's like we rewatched House recently. It's not like, oh my God, what's that guy up to? It's like, if I missed it, I missed it. No big deal.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Like last night, we were all watching the Olympics. I don't care if you're talking over the Olympics. I don't care if you're having side conversations. It's not like I'm going to miss anything. It's more just background noise. It is if there's something that's very plot heavy that you can't miss stuff. That's when it's like, this can't be happening. We all need our undivided attention here.
3 seed versus 14 seed. The 3 seed is saying literally. The 14 seed is eating in line to pay. I actually have no problem with either of these things because I think the literally thing has gone too far that people will instinctively react like that's not literal at all, even though sometimes it is, and they're using literally properly, that people have just lost sight of what's going on here.
This feels like a little Alanis Morissette-ish with the ironic song because people will always, like back then, we're always calling people out for saying, oh, that's not ironic. That's not ironic. So here's the thing about the literally thing that doesn't bother me as much. There's such an awareness now because of just the obnoxiousness of those, and I include myself in that, by the way, of those calling people out for things being figurative as opposed to literal, that I think there's enough of an awareness that it doesn't bother me as much. For example, full stop. I can't stand when people say full stop. Well, nobody says it anymore because I think there's like just general perception, like anybody who says that is just like ridiculous. Like try to figure out how to say your sentence or your message with some emphasis so you don't have to say full stop at the end. Eating in line to pay, I actually think is super obnoxious. Like just wait. Like I just think it's obnoxious to be in a line and to be unwrapping your thing that you haven't paid for while everybody's just kind of looking around waiting to pay. I find that off-putting.
Yeah, I'm probably on a bit more of the other side. The literally stuff does get me in writing. I would say more. It was kind of like we were talking about some of that other stuff where you don't have an excuse in writing. So say you're composing a tweet and you are like, if the Americans don't win the gold, I will literally punch myself in the face. That's actually kind of funny, I guess. Maybe that's a tweet someone could take, go for it. But what I can fix this so easily for everyone. Most of the time, if you aren't using literal in the literal sense, you're actually not going to punch your face. All you have to do is switch it to seriously. You'd say, if the US does not win the gold, I will seriously punch myself in the face. That's normally what people want to do because you're doing it for dramatic effect, but literally means you are going to go live on YouTube later and just deck yourself. Like that is what I expect. So just say seriously, you'll get the comedic effect, and then you don't have to be actually contradicting yourself. Can we do that?
I think that's a pretty good solution to this. I know that Cust will be on part 2 of this show, doing the other sides of the brackets. And the big one that he hates is less versus fewer. Sia. And I used to do this so much when we were in college together. And he would just shame me every time. And now I use fewer in the proper context. And now it bothers me.
Yeah, I hear you. And like those are like little things that aren't a big deal, unless you are in your position or in any of our positions where you're talking a lot. It's just those are easy mistakes to fix, and there's just no reason to perpetuate something that's so easy to correct. And fewer versus less, literally versus figuratively, or just not saying literally. These are espresso versus espresso. Like these are easy fixes, and if you don't take the time to do them, it's like, I don't know, what are we doing here?
Pete, you strike me as someone who would eat in a line. I've eaten in a line before. Sometimes you get hungry.
Yeah, well, I would be the person eating in the line to board the plane because I don't want to bring my food on there and create a smelly environment for everyone else. Yeah, everything with me and eating is generally on an expedited timeline. Like when we sit down for dinner as a family, like I'm done, well before anyone else finishes. I just eat fast. I'm one of those people that what's the saying? I eat to live. I don't live to eat. It's just like, let me get these calories in, whatever, to sustain me. I don't need to sit around here savoring every single goddamn bite.
So you would be like a big proponent of Soylent Green.
Sure. I mean, I've said, and I've gotten in trouble, I've said to my wife, if I could just take a pill each day that had all of my macronutrients and calories, whatever, and didn't have to make or prepare and do dishes for food, I would take that in a heartbeat. And I said, I will still sit with you. We'll have our communal time at dinner. We can have conversation. I'll sip on a drink. But if I didn't have to deal with any of the other kind of ancillary things related to food, I would take that in a heartbeat.
Sia, are you a robot person like Pete?
To some degree, sometimes, but no, I mean, there are times where I like to like sit down and like, in fact, I'm specifically a slow eater when I'm really enjoying what I'm consuming. And that actually goes for watching content too. There are shows, I mentioned the challenge. There are shows like series like from the sitcom bracket, for example, Pat, where the last season of Frasier, I actually waited to consume that I wasn't watching it when it was actually airing. I watched it many years later. And I was like, afraid to approach the last few episodes. So I actually treat my food in the same way where I do, if it's good and it's a good meal and I'm in a good setting, I do want to savor it. So I'm usually eating slower than everybody else.
You have way more self-control than anyone who's ever been on this show.
I don't know if that's true or not, but is that a compliment or
it is like, because I'm like Pete, like when it comes to eating, it's not that I don't want to savor my food. It's just, I eat fast. So I'm one of two minds of this. I do like your idea of just taking a pill and having everything in it for certain meals. Like if I go home and make lunch, like I'm trying to make the quickest, healthiest thing possible and then scarf it down so I can move on with the rest of my day. Usually for dinner is the same thing during weeknights. However, I am on the flip side, Pete, when it comes to ordering out with food, that I do want to get something I really like and savor it at that time.
Oh, for sure. And like, I would never, say you're doing a big group meal with friends and stuff like that. Like I'm not completely devoid of emotions and enjoying human interaction. But what would you say? 95% of your meals, it is like, I need this fuel. I'm moving quickly. Outside of that stuff, I would really like to simplify things.
For example, on my way to the studio today, I had a slice of toast with peanut butter on it and a banana in my car for breakfast.
If you could have taken that as just a pill and not dealt with trying to keep your hands at 10 and 2 while, putting peanut butter on a banana, I'm sure you would have taken that trade.
I think so too. I mean, this is why
agree.
sponsor of the show, factormeals.com, code Mayo, will get you 50% off, then 20% off the next month is so great. You just heat up a meal. It's like a minute and a half. Boom, you're good to go. See you.
Well done. Well orchestrated. That almost seemed planned, but I know it wasn't. Good stuff, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ad is already run for Factor Meals in the show. I'm just giving them another shout out because I enjoy the product so much. You will too, using code Mayo at factormeals.com. Next one, we have internet trolling versus in-store while car is at the gas pump. Now, this one is very interesting to me, Pete, because where I live, you don't have to pay for gas before you pump it. You pump it, then you go pay.
Oh, wow. Yeah, to me, that one doesn't bother me that much, right? Because it's not impacting my quality of life. You already have your spot at the gas pump. If you're, leaving that there, you're not impeding my traffic like some of the stuff we talked about at the grocery store. So yeah, to me, I don't know, that one doesn't bother me. See, and I am fascinated though by this Canadian wrinkle to the prompt.
Well, let me say this. I mean, there are times where a certain gas station is really crowded. And if you're just taking your sweet time after you've pumped your gas to waltz in and cruise the aisles, like that's super obnoxious because there's like 2 or 3 people maybe waiting for that specific gas tank. So I'm one of those people that if I do have to go in, I do that like sort of slow jog where I'm like letting everybody know who might have eyes on me. This is kind of the same type of jog you do when somebody gives you the right of way in their car and you don't want to walk through it. You want to show some respect. So you kind of like jog through it a little bit. So if I have to go inside, of course I'm going to leave my car as opposed to reposition my car, but I'm going to do it at like all signs are going to point to me doing it as quick as possible because I do think it's obnoxious to just leave your car like it's a parking spot when some other people might need that gas pump.
See, do you do the same thing when you park in the handicap spot? You get out of your car, pretend you have a limp for a little bit, and just in case someone sees you?
Let it be known that I've never done that. So no, I have no comment, no answer to that one.
Now, the paying before gas isn't ubiquitous across Canada. I think just like in like larger cities, that you probably do have to pay first. Now, if you pay you can pay at the pump and you pay first and then you put it takes whatever off your credit card. You don't even have to go in. You can just keep going. But most spots that I've been to across this country, at least, you pump your gas, then you go pay. Trust system.
Yeah, in America.
Good luck with that in the States.
Yeah, no, we verify. We don't trust.
So internet trolling, I think, wins this one.
Yeah, and I think we kind of hit on it a little bit with the faceless avatar stuff. We have entered an era where there are very funny trolls. I think that, we now kind of refer to them as shit posters. We know everything that they're going to say isn't going to be serious, and you're kind of primed for what they're delivering. I think there's kind of the distinction though from a troll, the person in your mentions, the person without the avatar that has no stakes to what they're saying. They haven't even tried to cultivate a personal brand around what they're doing. There's no consistency. They are just an erratic individual that knows they can say whatever they want and won't be held accountable. Yeah, I mean, that has to be a winner.
See, I'm very pro internet trolling. Once, like, I troll people I know on the internet through social media, through whatever.
Right.
But I know them. Like, I can tell them afterwards, like, yeah, don't worry about that. But it's the anonymous person that's just like, this is just malicious for no reason.
Well, that's what makes it a troll instead of an attack, because I don't mind the trolling either, because there's comedy in the troll, especially when you know that person. But as soon as it goes over to like really trying to hit someone hard, it becomes an attack, especially somebody you don't really know. But you know, they like that. There are those people on Twitter, for example, and it's like anytime they attack somebody, first of all, those never really end well. And a lot of times when you do that, it kind of becomes your identity because you do it just enough for you to like kind of be that guy. And I'm not a big fan of that. You know, I put out a lot of like positive content and things like that. I try not to, I'll troll somebody here and there, but it's usually, to your point, it's somebody that's close to me. The attacks are few and far between, because like it doesn't end well for anybody, because all that happens is they're going to attack you back. And it's just there's no fun in that, in my opinion.
7 versus the 10, quote, could care less, versus exiting the elevator first. See, I have to, one of the big, teaching your kids fundamental societal rules is somewhat difficult because they just have instincts to go do things. One thing I've really tried to hammer down on is not necessarily leaving the elevator first. It's, be it subways, elevators, whatever. You let the people who are on exit first, and then you go on. That's been a very, for all my dadding, that's one that's really stuck out to me over time that I really have to harp down on to make sure that they understand that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do that as well. That's like step one. I feel like for kids, step two is like letting people out first, like letting a woman or a child out first, or whatever the case may be. When it comes to like educating your kids, because yeah, they're like trying to run into the elevator. It's like kind of a game to them. But I don't have a huge like. There are times where you might need to exit first because of a crowded elevator. I always let other people exit first. It's just kind of my nature. I don't get really mad at people that don't do that unless they're like just being super rude and like cutting people off from the back or something, kind of like the airplane thing where people try to sneak up on the aisle when the plane has landed. It's like that's kind of bothers me. But for this one, to me, the one that's advancing is could care less, because that's not the right way to say it, obviously.
Yeah, I think the exit the elevator first. I guess I don't see too many offenders of this these days. Most people kind of understand the order with which you go in determines the order with which you go out. And if you're the first one in, you shift to the back. If you're the last one in, you're squeezing in there, but you're going to be the first one out because you were closest to the door. So I guess I haven't seen a lot where someone from like the back is like elbowing their way to the front to get out first. So I don't know if this one can be much of a pet peeve for me.
Well, I guess I'm more Reddit of the people waiting outside. Maybe, that's not what it says, so I'm reading this completely differently. It's the people waiting to get on the elevator, but try to get in before people get out, which makes no sense, but people actively try to do this.
Where I actually see that? If I'm taking
subway or bus
train, the subway or train. That's the one where it's like there's clearly people are coming out and you are rushing to get on. Yeah. I'm going to substitute that in my head because I think that one does happen and it frustrates me.
There's also a corollary to this where the people are on their phone entering the elevator, or they're in the elevator and they don't realize it's their stop because they're on the phone. That stuff really bothers me, to not be attentive that you're like in this box and you don't know when you're getting off or when you're getting on because you're so invested in your phone. That's definitely a big pet peeve. That's
like guy that doesn't go at a green light because he's on his phone, but he's the first, and then he basically piles traffic up behind him. It's like, oh God, yeah. Someone has to honk at him. By the time he turns, like one other person can get through, and then you're stuck there for like another 5 minutes. That's awful. So I have a hot take, Pete. I think that
let's hear it.
I want to even say 10 years time, we're going to look back at people being on their phones as being more destructive to society than drinking and driving ever was.
Yeah, agree.
No, I could see. I mean, the number of times too when I'm frustrated on the road, and then you drive by the person who's, doing something suboptimally or wrong, and they're on their phone, whether it's on the conversation or down texting, it has to be, 50% of the time. It's wild. And even with pedestrians these days too, I don't live in a busy city where I'm walking around a ton there, but the times I've been in New York too, the amount of people just down on their phones, just spearheading along, again, no awareness to those around them. I'm with you. It's an epidemic, and we need to shut it down now.
Well, this is why
the problem.
This is why self-driving cars are going to end up being a thing. It's not that people need to know how to drive. People can drive fine. It's just people don't drive fine. That this is kind of the next step, I guess.
Yeah, I think the bigger problem too, and the reason I think your point, your thesis statement is true, is that at least with drinking and driving, if people are at the scene, like you can do the roadside test, you can do the blood alcohol content test, you can do all of those things. Well, with the phone, like you can't really regulate that. You can't go back and look at the video footage or really do. I mean, obviously you could look at phone records, but like that doesn't even really tell you the story if somebody's looking down at it, like something on the internet or looking at a text or something like that, or an app. So I think that's like the biggest problem, is there's no way to kind of curb it, because there's no way to see after the fact, oh, this person was on the phone, outside of maybe like a red light camera that happens to catch somebody, or an eyewitness that happens to catch somebody, which would be like 1% of the time.
Yeah, see, I have no problem with people like checking their phones at a red light. It's not a problem. It's the not like not understanding how lights work is more of the problem, that they turn green eventually and you're going to have to be ready for that to happen. The physical act of driving the car and moving and like looking at your phone at the same time, that's the real problem. Anyway, that's I think it's pretty obvious, but that's where I want to go with that. Last two, humble bragging versus the winner of this bracket for me, boarding a plane before your group is called, which is, I don't want to advocate people being shot on sight like we live in some sort of dictatorship, but I don't know. I could sign off on that, I think.
Yes, I am. To me, this is a landslide. I love the humble brag from an entertainment perspective. Also, shout out to the comedian Harris Whittles. Rest in peace. He did pass away, the founder of the humble brag. I even have the humble brag book.
Me too.
Yeah, he did just such a brilliant job. It started out with celebrities. And for people, I mean, most people know what a humble brag is, but in case you don't, it's like a way to brag about yourself, but you have to couch it in some self-deprecating anecdote to try to make it more passable. So instead of saying like, I'm on TV in front of millions of people tonight, I'm so stoked about it, you're going to be like, oh man, I got a pimple and I'm going on, NBC tonight. And so it's like, oh, that's so cool. Like, yeah, the pimple makes it more relatable, whatever. I like those because it's always like, I'm the Leo meme when I see humble brags. Now I'm like, it's a humble brag. I love that. Like, to me, it's more sport. So I don't mind humble brags from an entertainment perspective, but yeah, the boarding before the plane groups is massively tilting.
There's got to be a way to curb this, Sia, because it's a real problem.
By the way, I literally is used in the proper context here. Right before this show, I tweeted out a humble brag tweet with being on the David Meltzer 2-minute drill show. So funny that this happens to be coming up. Agree with you, the boarding the plane. So this reminds me, and maybe you guys think I'm wrong, like when you're at a concert and you've got really good seats, let's say, and then like there's the aisleways, right, that you get into your seats with that people are not supposed to be in, but like the people with the terrible seats or the bleacher seats or whatever the case may be, they like constantly rush up and security has to like tell them constantly to like go back into their seats or whatever. I liken this to that because like you don't belong here, and I'm not trying to like be elitist about it, but like clearly your ticket says this thing and you don't belong here and yet you're here. The plane etiquette could be an entire show, I think, because there's so many things we could dissect. This one's a bad one.
Now, Pete, is it that people don't know the rules? Is it that when people get into an airport, the stress of flying, the stress of travel just short circuits their brain, or they just don't care?
Yeah, I think, it is just almost this like psychological response. I think people feel hurried in airports. They want to get to their seat. This is the one thing, if I can be in defense of the people who do jump up, and this is never, I am not defending anyone who tries to board ahead of their group. That is not allowed. But there are big chunks of groups, and sometimes being first in your group can be important because of overhead space. And this is the one time that I worry about it. If I am only carrying on bags, which often I do, there is nothing more frustrating to me than knowing I'm one of the last boarding groups. The overhead space is going to be thinning out. And if I have to check this bag because I'm one of the last people on, that makes me upset because then I have to go to the carousel. I'm tacking on 15, 20, 25 minutes to my trip. So that's the one time I personally have anxiety where I'm like, I'd like to be at the front of my last boarding group. But if I am, checked bags or I'm in an early boarding group, there is literally no reason to be getting up, jumping out, elbowing people for a spot.
And this is the reason that you get the herding around everything, is that people want access to that very valuable overhead space. As someone who never checks a bag ever, I am one of these people. But I try to upgrade my ticket. So like if you're going to pay to ship luggage anyway, you can probably like, instead of spending money on that, just spend money for the better seat, and then you get on right away, or get one of the credit cards that bumps you up in sort of status where you can have a lesser seat that's cheaper, but you can still board a little bit earlier. Like try to figure out a way around that, because like, let's say there's like 6 boarding groups. If you're in zone 3 or something like that, and you start seeing people from 5 or 4, or at least they start milling out near the top, like you now want to get up to do exactly what Pete said. Like you don't want to get left behind at the back of your group, because then you're shit out of luck. You're fucked when it comes down to it. So I understand it. There just needs to be a more civilized way to do this where people aren't crowding it, because it just makes getting on the plane longer for everybody.
Yeah, I wonder what you guys think because I flew Southwest out to California and back. I wonder what you think about their protocol because I got to say I didn't mind it. There's no like what you were talking about, Pete, with like you want to be on like the front end of your group and that's why you might be kind of like inching toward the line. Like they have it sort of segregated out, like 1 to 5 and 10 to 15, A group, B group, C group, and it's actually like I don't know, partitioned out, like really in a very effective
Yeah.
way. And it allows for actual cleaner boarding. In other words, like you're kind of going in there in like a steady stream where there's not a lot of confusion. And for the record, if you somehow get like a C group, well, you can pay the $15 to like get back into the A group if you missed it, because you have to kind of like check in 24 hours ahead of time. It's kind of like a game in that sense, but I do actually like that way because I agree, Pete, like the overhead boarding stuff, you don't want to check your carry-on, but you can ensure that you don't do that with Southwest if you get a bad sort of boarding assignment.
That's a good point. Southwest, it's a little bit more of the Wild West, as far as not having your seat assignments ahead of time. And because of that, they have to have the more, grouped, boarding process. I fly a lot of JetBlue. And so you just have your typical boarding groups and they can be big groups. Like there could be 50 people in group B or whatever. So, or if you are in group D, the last group to board, getting at the front of that could mean the difference between having to check your bags or not. So yeah, I see both sides. There's good people on both sides here, including myself sometimes when I need my precious overhead space.
Yeah, when you need the overhead space, all bets are off because then you get into self-preservation mode. So I understand what it is, but if there's just no enforcement of this. If there was any sort of enforcement, people would listen. Be like, hey, you tried to cut in. You're zone 4. They called zone 2. You're in this line. You now have to board last. Sorry. So don't get caught. But they don't have the guts to do it.
But Pat, they do like when the person scans their ticket, they usually, if it's the wrong zone, don't they usually like send them back out and kind of they not? I actually don't know the answer.
No, if you're in zone 5, go stand in fucking zone 1. They'll let you on.
Wow. Okay.
It happens all the time. But the one thing I've noticed between like North, and maybe it's just where I traveled to within Europe versus North America, is that a lot of places in at least the European airports that I went to, they would double board. They would board people in the front and the back of the plane at the same time, which just made it far more efficient.
Interesting. Okay.
Because then people with because you will see like some people that board a little bit ahead who are towards the back of the plane. Because I think that like the way that the zones go a lot of the time is like your first class, your business class, and then the next step down are your first 3. But then the next zone is usually the very back of the plane, so you don't get a complete overload. But these people at the back of the plane will see overhead space before they get to their seat and just throw their bags up above not their seat. And then the people who board last or who are in the middle look up and like everything's gone.
Interesting.
You see it all.
By the way, Pat, I do want to say about humble brag because, like, obviously that's going to lose to board plane before group as a 15 seed. Humble brag is going to lose, but there are the people. I think the reason why this might be on here, we can ask Markowski about it. I think the reason this might be on here is because people don't know how to properly humble brag. They don't do it in that proper self-deprecating way that Pete was sort of lining up. So I do think there is a lot of that on Twitter. I mean, I've done that probably as well. And I know a lot of people do it where they're like just putting out a full brag and they're trying to they think they're throwing humility into it, but it's just a straight out brag. So I just wanted to point that out, that maybe some people have a different take on humble brag.
Well,
and see, I'm going to give you, I did just go to your feed because I wanted to see what you were calling a humble brag. You said incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be on the 2-minute drill, be on the lookout for the new season. That's not a humble brag. That's, I guess if you did say incredibly humbled, then it's like saying like, that I have this high stature and it was, so whatever, but just saying you're grateful to me, that's just a genuine tweet. I don't see any insincerity or trying to couch a brag in there. So I'm letting you off the hook here, man.
I appreciate it. That's the natural evolution of being on Twitter a certain number of years, because you caught me 3 years ago and I'm bragging about like some random golfer who just had like a really good round 1 and is about to crash and burn round 2. So there's a cultivation, there's an evolution. So I think I might have found my sweet spot. Thank you, Pete.
So of those 16, I'm going to vote for boarding plane before group to be my winner of that bracket. That is my biggest pet peeve of all the ones that we talked about in the second half. Pete, where would you go as your winner?
Yeah, I'm thinking back, like which one of those got me the most riled up, and it's by far the smelly food on the plane. I think that one it is such a specifically triggering thing for me. It just all of those elements of travel and food and smelliness and personal space, all of it collides into that one being my dominant seed.
Sia?
Yeah, I'm going against the grain here a little bit. I have two that I really like. The cues during a movie or a show, cues or comments, I should say, during a movie or show, that really does bother me. And I'm going with the 16 seed here. No profile pic. This is for all the creators
Wow.
out there, including you two. It's just, I don't get it. You're right, Pete. This is a social media platform. Put anything. It doesn't have to be your picture. Put anything on there so that we can engage with you in a slightly better way than just some gray avatar. Come on, everybody. Step it up.
So last thing on the smelly food, Pete. So you're very anti that. I'm very anti that. Sia doesn't seem to care. And this is an idea that I've been playing around with for a while. And the pushback I always get, it's like, well, people are going to stink on the plane. But I don't think that's going to be the case. Why aren't there more gyms behind security at a plane? Like you show up like 3 hours early. Would it be awesome to go like work out for an hour?
Yeah, I mean they'll have little kids centers. They obviously have, the premium lounges. If you're one of the elite members, why not? Why not? I'm on board with that idea. And you know what? Like if you're going to do that, couldn't you just have a nice little locker and shower setup too, where we don't even have to be smelly? We could just have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, so at Pearson Airport in Toronto, they do have a gym. They have a Good Life Fitness Center there with showers, with lockers.
Really?
But it's before security. So I used to show up like early, check out the security line, be like, okay, I'll go work out before I get on the plane. This is great. I'll take my shower. It'll be fine. I guess people's thing is that it would be like people would be too rushed and they wouldn't take the shower. But I mean, maybe it's where I go to the gym. People have good hygiene that even like if I go for a run, Pete, and I'm sweating a bunch, I don't stink because I've been sweating. Like I still wore deodorant. Like I'm just not a naturally smelly type person, but I don't feel like if you go work out, you're just inherently going to stink all the time. Like if you stink, you stink. If you don't stink, you don't.
And I think you have to, this is the problem though, Pat. Normally people with that level of self-awareness about their body odor aren't going to be the offenders, right? It's the people who have no clue that they are actually a very smelly individual. And those are going to be the people that ruin it for the rest of us.
But don't you think that those people would smell anyway?
I suppose, but I think it's definitely exasperated, right? Like if you're inherently a smelly person and then you go and work out on top of that, I think it is going to be even worse.
Okay, that I can see. I don't think it would be as big of a problem as a lot of people tend to point out to me, but maybe that's just my own biases coming into it. That is part one of the Pet Peeve Bracket. Part two will be out a little bit later. Sia, thank you for bringing this all together. This is really... You're the middleman, the glue who brought together this Pet Peeve Bracket. So thank you for helping me organize this.
Again, middleman is a proper name. I was simply a liaison. I think I am responsible for some of the things on this list, but it really was mostly John Markowski. So credit to him.
Pete, thanks for the time, dude.
Yeah, you know what? I thought this might be a cathartic exercise, but I think it just got me worked up talking about all the pet peeves. Some I didn't even know I had. So thank you for that, Pat.
Check out Pete at a bunch of places, My Fantasy Life, and of course the Pete Overzet YouTube channel. Go subscribe to that right now. Subscribe to my audio podcast, Pat Mayo Experience, wherever you get your podcast. And Sia, what's the one thing that you want to promote where they can find you? Not Dave Meltzer's show, where they can find you.
Yeah, I post all my content on Twitter anyway. So if you follow me at Sia Nejad, SIANEJAD, you're going to find out where I am pretty much all the time.
Well, smash the like while you're here. Check out the entire bracket down in the description. Use code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy in case you want to help out the show and get in on some great games over at Underdog Fantasy. And I will see you next time.
Mayo experience. Experience.